Welcome to our 81st podcast. Today we'll be talking about power and agency, inspired by Viktor Frankl's perspectives in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. What's one thing you can do now to help your team find power and agency through meaningful work? Keep listening to find out.
Welcome to Harmonious Workplaces, a podcast about corporate culture, organizational change management, and workplace behavior. Harmonious Workplaces was started by independent consultants Rich Cruz, Ben Kleinman, and Cheryl Volpe to explore, challenge, and build on various organizational culture and change management concepts. It's a blend of theory and practice based on their personal and professional experiences working with companies of all sizes across various industries. If you own a business, lead a team, want new ideas about the corporate environment, or just want to listen to a group of consultants talking about how to make work more enjoyable, we invite you to sit back, relax, and dive in with us to Harmonious Workplaces.
Hello, Harmonious Workplaces listeners. Welcome back to our podcast. I'm Rich Cruz, an organizational development consultant, joined by my co-host, Ben Kleinman. Hey, Ben, how are you this morning?
Hey, everyone.
So, Ben, today we're going to talk a little bit about, something that was inspired by a book that I recently read and you've read in the past too, right? Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a powerful book.
Incredibly.
I couldn't put it down.
Incredibly powerful and very inspirational. And
Yeah. Quick read too, but just so much, so many lessons to be learned. And there's a lot in there. I couldn't help but to think of some of the things we've talked about recently about resilience and adaptability and all of that. But maybe we can start by framing out the book and what it's all about. And, for people who haven't read it yet.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I think one of the things that resonates with me a lot from his book and his work is this idea that you have a choice. And we'll get into that, but you always have some kind of a choice, regardless of what's going on. And even if that's only a choice for how you respond or how you behave, it's still your choice. And so this notion of agency at a very, very basic level is, for me, very powerful. And it's something that I think can really impact how people respond in different situations at work, on a team, or in a project, or when an organization is going through lots of changes. And it's something that the better managers will be able to help their people through that and encourage that and whatnot. So we'll unpack all that, but yes, let's take a step back, maybe take a step back, frame the book, and then dive right in.
Right on. Very good. So, Man's Search for Meaning, written in 1946.
Right.
It only took him a few days to write this thing, right? I mean,
and so people have some context. He's a Holocaust survivor. He was in the concentration camps, and right after being liberated from the concentration camp he was in, he writes this book, and it's clear he's been thinking about a lot of this throughout his time in the camp. And so he stays in, I think you said it was Austria.
Right.
He goes to Austria and decides to stay there and live there. And so right out of the gates, as it were, he writes this book, and it explains his whole theory and all that. And then he goes into practice.
Well, it's one of the things that struck me was he had the opportunity to leave on a visa to go, I believe it was to the U.S. Before Austria was taken over, right? So he stayed behind to take care of his parents and thought he could make a difference there. So, his whole story started with this purpose, this sense of meaning, and for him that was taking care of his family, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. So he'd already had that mindset, a purpose-driven mindset,
right?
Okay.
And like you said, after the war and everything that he went through, five camps I think he stayed through. It was I'm going to go back to Vienna, right? And so some of what he so of course, the first part of the book, it was recapping his experiences, right?
Hmm.
Just
Hmm.
so much that he went through, and some of what he observed. um but then, after that, he, as a psychiatrist, right? So he was a doctor of psychiatry, and um, yeah, he created this theory of logotherapy.
Right, right. The
Right,
idea that you can have a model of psychotherapy based on helping people find meaning
right,
in their lives. And so, if you, the idea I think for him was that if you can find meaning, you'll resolve any underlying issues. And so
right,
that's sort of contrasted with other therapists that have tried to say that people's primary intent is to seek out power or to seek out pleasure. For Frankl, it was all about seeking out meaning,
right. Yeah, Freud, you know,
all
he
about
at least,
pleasure. Yeah,
yeah, all about pleasure, right? And then Adler was about power, and
power. Yeah,
this, the seeking that. And to some extent, we've talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
yeah,
and
yeah.
some of that certainly aligns. I mean, we're looking for beyond our physiological needs, and then our stability needs, right? We have love and belonging, as that third tier,
Hmm.
and then esteem, and then self actualization.
Right, right. And
Right,
so all of these, whatever theory you find resonates with you, they all play into those upper levels of Maslow's hierarchy.
right, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And some of what really struck me about Dr. Frankl's work is that he was talking about uh, the meaning of somebody's work and achievement, right?
Right.
Doing something that
Right.
has significance, um,
Yeah.
which just made a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah. And so going back to his time in the concentration camps and sort of the foundations of his theory of his model of therapy, it seems like for him there were three primary ways of finding meaning in your life, finding your purpose or your, I'm extrapolating, but finding your own purpose, your value in life, your meaning in life. And so
Right.
for him that centered on doing something,
Hmm.
kind of experience something, whether that's caring for another person or experiencing some kind of event with other people, and then at your attitude. So essentially your attitude towards whatever situation you're in, you find meaning in that attitude and controlling that attitude.
Sure. Yeah. And from the suffering that people endured, right? Finding some meaning in that, but also, the uh, maintaining some sense of dignity
Yep.
through all that, right?
Yep. And he found that of his peers in the camps, the other prisoners, he found that those that seemed to be healthier, that seemed to survive longer, that's the were the people that had some sort of meaning, whether
Right.
they were just finding meaning in doing the tasks that they were assigned, or whether they found meaning in thinking about a loved one or um, caring for another person in the camp, or just like I think Viktor Frankl, finding meaning in this idea that whatever the guards did to him, whatever the other prisoners did to him, he could still respond in a way that maintained his self dignity
Sure.
and kind
Sure.
of not letting people take that last vestige of humanity away from him. And
Right.
so those three kind of played out. So, anyways, he saw that people who had some flavor of meaning tended to do better under those extreme circumstances.
Right. Right.
And yeah,
And
that's sort of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I remember, uh, stories that he told about people who were caring for others, right? That the altruism of just making sure that somebody was even under those circumstances, had received some kind of care.
Yeah.
Those people tended to be the ones who were survivors.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. But I think you were onto something. I think you were about to say before I cut you off, and that you were looking at how these approaches to finding meaning can then be translated into a slightly more healthier environment in the work
right,
and
sure.
workplace and organizations and whatnot. And so maybe that's something that we can dig into and unpack a little bit.
Yeah. Well, there's just he left this book, not just to recount, and he was very explicit in it wasn't just to recount his experience. It was
Hmm.
as the backdrop to his continued work after, um, which can be applied to the workplace and a lot of what we've talked about. So why don't we do this, because we're just about that at that time. Let's take a
Yeah,
break and talk about some of those applications, within the workplace in the context of some of the things we've talked about before.
sounds good.
Great. We'll be right back.
Meet Hermie the HR Hermit Crab. Laugh, learn, and lead better with Hermie. Hermie is here to tackle workplace madness with heart and humor from Harmonious Workplaces. He's perfect for HR pros, leaders, and change makers. Hermie teaches workplace lessons through cartoons and is great for team discussions and workshops. Get your copy on Amazon now. www.hermiehrhermitcrab.com. Again, that's hermiehrhermitcrab.com.
And we're back. So, Ben, we were talking about Man's Search for Meaning, the book,
Hmm.
but also our search for meaning in the workplace, right?
Right, right,
Yeah.
exactly. And so one of the things that I found a little bit interesting, and we can draw a lot of parallels in terms of the theory that Frankl developed and his ideas about finding meaning and having that meaning um, give you an opportunity for a healthier, happier, longer lived experience at work in this
Hmm.
situation. But one of the things I found really interesting was this idea that you have to have some kind of hope. And it seems like that's something that's come in for a little bit of criticism over the years. And in general, much of his theory has stood up, and there are
Sure.
schools of therapy that practice logotherapy and teach that. And this idea that hope in the future is critical was one that seemed a little bit maybe more to have taken a little bit more criticism than some of his other ideas. And so, do you feel like you have to have that? And let's
I
let's just say in a work environment, do you feel like if you're working for a client or you're working for a company, do you have to have that sense of hope to
I
find
do
meaning?
I do think that there needs to be some of that, and we've seen, there have certainly been studies about, people with who lose, their sense of hope within the workplace. There's I can't recall the study's name right now, but it was a bunch of college students that were they they were in a situation where some of them were prisoners and some of them were guards, right?
Yeah,
Forgive
it's a
me, I can't
classic
remember the.
study.
Yeah, classic study. And some of them, and this is all make believe, but some of them lost hope. Within days, they had to cut the study short because it just went off the rails, right? But in the workplace, there are certainly times where people they lose hope, and what happens is that their engagement dips, with their productivity dips, their
Right,
chances of being part of the organization for whatever reason, whether it's voluntarily or not, right? That's not going to be long lived if they don't remain hopeful for being able to achieve what they're set out to achieve.
right, right. That just to cite that experiment we were talking about. It was the Stanford Prison Experiment
Stanford, yeah.
by Philip Zimbardo, and Zimbardo had to stop it early because the prison
Right.
guards were um, getting a little bit too into their role, and they were abusing the
Exactly.
prisoners and really relishing it. And people, both prisoners and the prisoners, really sort of embrace their
Their
situations so
situation, right.
fully. And I think what he was showing is how easy, it's almost instant, how easy people jump into those roles and
Right.
adopt the mindset of a prison guard or a prisoner. And it's also amazing how quickly some of the prison guards became very abusive and just absolutely horrible. And that was
For
another
sure.
thing that really jumped out to me from Frankel's book is he was saying that there's always and only two types of, he called it two races of men, but let's say two types of people. You had
Hmm.
people that were decent people and people that were indecent people.
Right.
And so it's a little bit of an extreme perspective, but I think you can say, broadly speaking, that's probably pretty accurate in terms of experience at work. There's people
Hmm.
who you're gonna find are very agreeable and that you can discuss things with and even disagree with very amiably and share perspectives and um, collaborate very easily. And then there are people who are just absolute horror shows to work with, and for
Sure.
whatever reason they seem to get your goat, you seem to get their goat, and it's just oil and water, and it's just
Hmm.
not a fit that's going to work. And so
Right.
um, how you then respond to that is where I think it can be very helpful to adopt some of his principles, Frankel's principles, in terms of finding some way to find meaning in that relationship, whether you focus on the work and ignore the people,
Hmm.
or discount the people and just focus on doing the work, or you find some way to relate to that person
Right.
and find something about that you can find meaning in, or you say that person is that person that I'm not going to be able to change them right now. They're not going to be able to change right now. So I'm just going to find meaning in maintaining my sense of professional self, or my professional dignity, and that then gives you a way to carry that forward.
Right. So that's the principle that he talked about choosing the way that we respond to a workplace situation, right?
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah,
and we today we have opportunities to be able to be um, to offer things like coaching and policies and different cultural aspects
right,
that
right.
probably were not around even in the pre or post war era, right?
No,
It's
especially
just
not in Germany or Austria, which were
right.
very hierarchical, male
Sure.
dominated cultures.
Right.
It's and even now it seems like there are many cultures where this it would be challenging to have those kinds of supports and those kinds of conversations. But for the most part, in most Western companies, I think that's now almost kind of standard, where you
Hmm.
have coaching, where you have training, where you have an HR department or an HR function that's there to help you as the employee, at least to some degree, with difficult situations. Many companies, especially the bigger ones, have some sort of therapy type of benefit available as part of the
Hmm.
healthcare benefits that they offer. And so it's
Certainly.
all of that, as well as just the environment. A lot of managers and leaders are realizing that it's better to have an environment that is culturally healthy, where people can speak their mind and offer ideas or offer different perspectives without feeling like they're going to get stomped down or penalized for sharing a difference of opinion. And so those
Exactly.
environments are becoming more and more common, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, we still have to. There's still this. We have to get the work done, right? So there's always still this
Oh yeah, yeah,
th- there is some degree of leveraging power, these different types of power that are out there, coercive rewards. Some of the other ones are referent, expert, and given power, right?
Hmm.
So leveraging, some of that in order to get the work done is still something that we that leaders have to do, right? But I think it's done when it's done in a purpose-driven, mindful way that um, yeah allows people to have some degree of their own autonomy, which is something that they did not have during any of those camps, right? At all. And even in the post-war, we it was a rather coercive type of environment, right? You either do the work or you're fired, right? But I think as people have moved into, like, in the 70s, that's where, like, goal setting theories started to come into play, right? Where people are able to now set their own goals and have some degree of autonomy, and we're building in cohesiveness into talking about teams, and how teams play. I think all of that, with some support and relationship building and being mindful about the social aspect of work, has helped to bring some of Frankel's principles, into the modern day workplace.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think we're about that time again, Ben. So why don't we do this? We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, let's have a few takeaways for our audience.
Sounds good.
Cool. We'll be right back. At Harmonious Workplaces, we believe work should provide purpose, satisfaction, and growth. We empower people to thrive by fostering environments where individuals can find meaning in their work and organizations can succeed through thoughtful, well-executed strategies. We're committed to making work better for the people who do it and the leaders who guide them. To discover how Harmonious Workplaces can impact your organization, visit www.harmoniousworkplaces.com and book a free 30-minute information session with one of our consultants today. Again, that's www.harmoniousworkplaces.com. And we're back. So, Ben, I really enjoyed talking about this book and the concepts, and now we've come to this third segment of our show where we try to leave people with something that is actionable, or at least something that they can think about, right?
Yeah.
What comes to mind for you?
I think there are a couple of things that come to mind in terms of one, as an employee or as a consultant or whatever your role is within an organization or some sort of work relationship, you always have a sense of choice, and you can choose how you want to be in that moment and how you want to be in that working relationship. And
Sure.
when you make a choice that is more of a positive leaning choice, you either focus on doing the work, and or you focus on building a strong relationship, or you focus on maintaining a sense of dignity and professionalism, you tend to have better outcomes. And so you tend to just be in that moment better. There's less stress. You tend to have a lot longer, healthier type of working relationship. And so, what seems like would make sense is for people to do the heavy lifting to find what gives them meaning. And from a organizational structural perspective or a managerial perspective, it seems like it would be very helpful for leaders and managers to create an environment where it's possible for people to do that, where they have the support, where they have encouragement from leaders and their line managers to find ways to find that meaning in their work. And so between the individual doing the work and the leaders and managers creating that environment and supporting people in that work, I think you kind of have these two things coming together in a very
Sure.
powerful way, where you can then have people who are very fulfilled and in a work way,
Right.
self-fulfilled in that sort of work way. And that gives people some of what you've talked about, that sense of not just meaning, but that sense of agency. And from that
Hmm.
sense of agency, you then have a sense of power of being able to do what you are meant to do and have the knowledge, skills, ability to do all of it. You have the motivation to do all of it. And then you can do some really, really good work. It's a great vision to work towards.
For sure. So we're talking about like there's the overall like culture of the company, right? Which the values and the
The behaviors, the
behaviors,
beliefs, the way
right,
people show up at work sometimes is the way people talk about that.
right, and the shared goals and purpose of the company, the vision of the company, which arguably you would think that the employees are going to be aligned to, right? But
You would, but a lot of times people take work because they have to take work, or
right, sure,
the goals of a company can change. The markets are always changing. Customers' preferences and needs are always changing, and so how a company decides to evolve, it may start out as something that you as an employee find very meaningful, very valuable, and enjoy contributing to, and then over time there's a shift or it drifts and you're no longer
and
quite in sync,
that changes, right?
and it
But
changes. Yeah.
but to to your point though, I think those people have the ability, their own power to have their own sense of meaning despite their alignment to those changes. Is that where you're
I
going with
think
that?
that would be Frankel's idea, is that you can always
Right.
try to find some sort of meaning in any given situation. And let's say, stay with this example for a minute. If you disagree with one of the values of your company, you can stay there and just focus on doing your job and the work, doing
Right.
it extremely well, very professionally, delivering high quality work on time, under budget, whatever that means for you and your organization. You can focus on the relationships and supporting other colleagues and making sure that those other colleagues have what they need to do their work, that those other colleagues are feeling supported and feeling like they can find their own meaning, and you're enabling that for those folks. Um, and then you always have even if you don't find meaning in those two approaches, you can always find meaning in showing up at work and just being a professional about it and
Sure.
maintaining your dignity in an environment where you might not agree with everything, or where you might not find value in the same way that the organization seems like it does.
Right. So some of that meaning can be derived from the work itself,
Hmm.
then the social relationships that we have, or I think as Freckle put it, the love or relationships that
Yep.
people have among each other.
Sure.
And then even when we have that feeling of disconnect or some kind of conflict, adversity, whatever that is, the suffering, we can still find meaning in that enough to keep us moving forward
Hmm.
within the organization. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
essentially, it that seems to go back to some very ancient things in terms of, you probably as a kid learned to just have self-respect and hold your head up high and try your best, whether
Hmm.
it's on a little league team or with your first job or whatever. This idea of showing up, doing the best you can, and taking pride in your work. I mean, that's a large part of what
Yeah,
a lot of this country was founded on.
for sure. Yeah. Well, one of the we've talked about purpose-driven work, purpose-driven workplaces, right? And we've talked about things like Simon Sinek's "Start with Why" and those types of things. And one of the phrases from the book, this might be paraphrased or might be an exact quote. So you got to correct me if I'm wrong, but those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. And I just think I think he was paraphrasing Nietzsche from that, but having a very strong why makes all the difference in the world. Yeah,
Right, right. That purpose, that meaning, you
yeah,
can endure. I mean, Frankl endured horrendous, unimaginable conditions, and fortunately, most of us at work don't have quite the same level of duress. But you can endure quite a lot if you just have that vision, that purpose, and
for sure.
um, yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
right. And
Well,
then
Ben, oh,
I
okay.
was just going to say, I think that also, at least in my experience, people who have that strong sense of self based on their purpose, they see themselves as a very professional doer of a certain type of work, or they see themselves as a very professional caregiver, or they
Sure,
just have a very high standard of how they present themselves at work. They maintain that level of dignity and self respect.
that
Those
makes sense.
people tend to be the people that within an organizational culture are looked at as leaders, are looked at
Right.
as having some level of power within that organization, and it may not be hierarchical or structural power. It's oftentimes socially granted power
That referent
or referent power, right?
or
And
expert power, one of those
yeah,
things. Yeah.
that and sometimes they're subject matter experts, and sometimes they're just people who you know are just the perfect person for X or the perfect person for Y, and it's really amazing to see those people operate.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but I've taken us off track.
Oh no, this is great. Actually,
Back
I
to
think
it.
we're at a point where I mean we would love to hear from the audience. We're on YouTube, Spotify, our own
Hmm.
website at
LinkedIn.
harmoniousworkplaces.com,
Yep.
LinkedIn. We love to get your thoughts on how you can and have brought in some of this
Yeah. Meaning.
finding meaning right in work, right? um, because it just seems to be the cornerstone of what makes a successful, efficient, and effective organization.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for joining us again on our podcast. Please like, subscribe, go to harmoniousworkplaces.com and check out our other episodes. Again, this is episode 81. Can you believe that? Just, oof. And until we meet again, make change your friend.
Thanks for listening to Harmonious Workplaces. You can find Harmonious Workplaces on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and other streaming platforms. We'd love any feedback on whatever channel you find us on. Please rate, like, and share our podcast with your network, and remember to add Harmonious Workplaces to your list of favorites to get notified about each new episode.